Welcome to a new episode of The Edge Lab, the response media podcast where marketing meets data and behavioral science. Today's guest is Scott Hanbury, analytics team lead at the Clorox company. Let's dive into the lab.
Welcome to Edge Labs, our podcast series that delves directly into the evolving role of marketing, the role it plays in business strategy and consumer engagement. So each episode is going to feature leaders and subject matter experts discussing how data transforms the customer relationships, our advertising strategies, and our overall business success. I'm going to be your host, Amy Sirlin, and I'm the Chief Client Officer at Response Media. I'm thrilled to welcome you to our very, very first episode, The Power of Empathy in Grocery Data Storytelling. So in a world driven by automation, as we see across the board, and algorithms, the conversation is going to explore why empathy is becoming one of the most essential tools in any leader's toolkit today. Data doesn't just drive changes, stories do. When we tell good stories with empathy and influence, it certainly shapes our shoppers' behavior, and ultimately it fosters loyalty and it fuels our growth. So joining me today are two really important guests, and I'm really excited to introduce Scott Hanbury, who is the analytics team lead for grocery at the Clorox company, and Dr. Alvin Glay, my colleague here at Response Media and our chief strategy officer. I refer to him as my podcast partner in crime. And we're going to start with you, Scott. Why don't you kick us off and tell us a little bit about you, how we got here, and all the great things that you've done throughout your career.
Yeah, I worked through college in a grocery store. Started as a bagger and sorting bottles in Michigan in the can room, which is one of the most dirty, disgusting jobs. Worked up into a store manager role eventually. I worked through almost every role. Wound up going after college into a broker community. Went through a lot of mergers and acquisitions there, and eventually wound up at Hormel Foods, then Coca-Cola, and now at the Clorox company. My job is really, I guess if you were to ask any sales company what my job is, they would probably tell you I'm here to convince retailers to do the things we want them to do.
Yeah.
But in reality, the way I look at my job is it's my job to understand the customer, understand the dynamics of the category, understand our shoppers. And when I say the customer, I mean the retailer, and really develop an empathy for where they're at and convince my sales team to approach them in a way that they want to be spoken to. So I sort of flip it on its head a little bit. But they find a lot of success when they can do those things, when they can actually, instead of coming at them as to what we want, it's like, what can we do for you to help you solve your problems?
Which is what really leads us to shaping those behaviors and helping to feel like their stories are being told and we're all working toward that common goal. Scott, I love that. That's an exciting role to play. Dr. Glay, how about you, sir? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Amy. My name is Alvin Glay. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer here at the agency. I've been here about 6 years. Now I'm a boomerang. I was here back in the early, when was it? I think 2012. That was my first stint here. But I have an interesting background. I spent 10 years on the brand side working at Verizon, leading product there, Wahoo Fitness. I ran global marketing there. And here at the agency, I run all of our strategy across media, analytics, CRM, and creative. I am a big fan of this conversation because, my perspective in this is as someone who's navigated multiple identities, Liberian, 7 years as a refugee, American, I've understood that, people really feel acknowledged understood when they're just being acknowledged, right? They have to feel seen and understand in context. And that's how I approach everything as it pertains to strategy. And that's what we're talking about, empathy. So this is such an amazing conversation.
So Guys, honestly, the connection between data and decision making isn't really just strategic, it's truly human. And according to Harvard Business Review, nobody's going to argue with Harvard Business Review, 76% of our executives say that storytelling improves decision making, right? When we can connect with that consumer and make them feel part of the journey and help them to feel like they are part of the experience with us, that's going to lead to higher purchase rates. And from the consumer side, 85% say they're more likely to support the brands that understand them on a personal level. So that connection is really, truly bringing it home. So the alignment between insight and empathy, that intersection is really where the most powerful marketing truly happens. And Scott, listen, if we can start by looking at how personal storytelling can shape strategy, trust, loyalty. I mean, you've been at Coca-Cola, you've been at Hormel, you've now at Clorox. Tell us, how does storytelling differ across the various CPG categories? What nuances have you observed? And how is that translating data into insights for all the various product types that you've touched?
Well, yeah, thanks. That's a great question. The fundamentals I find of storytelling don't change for the most part, but the company approaches do.
Yes.
And years ago when I was at Coca-Cola, I think they've completely changed and revamped, a lot of differences there now. But at the time, we had to actually have people come in and intervene with Kroger that we were calling on, because we came off as so arrogant, because we would come in there with all these plans. We would do they did a summit at some corporate thing. They went to Sweden. They come down like Moses coming down with the 10 commandments and like, this is what you need to do. Take our vast knowledge. And retailers are like, you didn't even ask us, what our plan was. You didn't have any understanding what we're trying to do. I've read this great book, How to Know a Person. And in it, there's a quote it's great because there's a quote within a quote. But it said, human beings need recognition as much as they need food and water. No crueler punishment can be devised than to not see someone, to render them unimportant or invisible. And then it says, the worst sin towards our fellow creatures is not to hate them, George Bernard Shaw said, but to be indifferent to them. That's the essence of inhumanity. To say this is to say you don't matter and you don't exist. And the thing is I've always found that people would tell me that, Mo, my buyer was hostile. And I'm like, the first question I would say is, what did you do? What are they trying to do? What are their goals? What are they trying to accomplish? I want to get them to have that empathy for what they're trying to accomplish. And quite honestly, I do think often we don't see our retailers and our stakeholders as people who have needs and concerns that we're trying to address. And when we address them in an empathetic way and explain it in a story which is explainable, right? Helps it make it understandable. It can make a huge difference in your results.
Yeah, I mean, to kind of piggyback off of Scott's response, for me, I like to draw from the marketing literature, right? Which there's been a lot of research on there. And there's one specific literature that I like to draw from to help me answer this question, which is called the consumer culture theory, right? It talks about people don't buy because of transactional reason. They buy to seek meaning, right? And what that means is, there are 4 pillars. One is what they call the culture identity projects, which is how do we express ourselves? We buy to seek value. We buy to see, understand who we are. And the second piece is, sense of community, sense of belonging, and all that stuff. So when you really look at it, is, it's all about user centricity, right? And data is just the empathy map, right? And is a conversation starter if we're willing to listen to it. So it's how do we enable them and really connect with them that they're saying, I feel seen, I feel understood, and then that drives sort of the empathy component we're talking about. So, when you can think about it in that context that, data really gives you sort of the starting point to understand someone, but it's about the context of it that they feel seen, then you're able to connect with them at the emotional level.
Products really do a great job listening to how I want to be seen, heard, felt, and serving me the right products at the right time. It is really mind-blowing to think about where we started in this industry and where we're sitting today. It's revolutionary where we're probably looking to go even in the next 365, which in our industry is basically now a lifetime. But right, I think about today's consumers really aren't looking for products like you both talked about. They're looking for relevance. They want to be seen. They want to be heard. And that is going to raise the bar continually for marketers and analytics alike. And it's no longer enough just to report on the numbers. It's no longer enough to just talk about the statistics. We've got to translate them into insights that actually resonate on a personal level. To both your points, what does this mean to me? How is this going to influence me? And I'd love to spend some time talking about how empathy and the grocery data can bring that understanding to life. So, Scott, you've spoken a lot about the role of empathy in analytics. And I want to better understand how that shapes your interpretation of the grocery data.
Well, there's a couple things. First, to get the empathy, I have to understand my audience completely. Yep. And I tend to have an approach where I'll almost take a pyramid type view. And the base is like, who am I dealing with from a retailer perspective and what are their basic needs? But then I go straight into the middle layer of the pyramid, and that's what are the needs and wants and goals of the actual category manager? Because sometimes they're different, right, than what the overall account is. They expect to grow, they expect not to grow. What are the hangups? I even ask my buyers sometimes, what do they get incentivized on? Well, how do they make bonus?
Yeah.
And do you want to get promoted? What do you want to do next? And I'm trying to figure out ways I can help them do those things. It gives me the empathy for understanding really what is the task at hand they're trying to solve, so I can be a partner and not just some annoyance, some fly that came in, and it's like, okay,
a vendor.
Right. I'm a partner, not a vendor. And then the last thing is understanding their personality. And I think about the 4 basic personality types where you've got a driver and you've got more personal, amiable people, and you've got analytic people, and there's all of these different ways to approach them, and really understanding, like with a type A person or a heavy driver, helping them come to the logical conclusion to where they almost think it's their idea.
Yes.
Right. And it is kind of their idea, right? Because we've taken them through the process and they've come to the same conclusion we have. So to me, that's addressing with empathy. Forming the data is a different story, though, a little bit, because when I have to go immerse in the data, everything in data, right? If you're looking at syndicated data, is mostly rearview mirror stuff. We're looking back at things that have already happened. And so that can be kind of stale, and it's hard to breathe life into that. And I always view having a real understanding of shopper behavior as a mix of science and like a biology and psychology, if that makes sense.
Oh, you're speaking Dr. Glay's language. I love it.
And I think about all of the analytics and post-mortem data that comes in as biology. And I kind of think of that as like biology or environmental science. Sure. So I would say we think about AMPS, right? Assortment, merchandising, pricing, shelving. And I want to assess if the category is healthy or not based on simple metrics. So I think about assortment, and you think about a category in a store, and you think about it like a section of the forest. Let's just call that an analogy, right? Okay. Let's say the assortment is a healthy balance of animals in the forest, right? There's a healthy balance of products. For merchandising, if you think about a quick a sale, which creates room for growth, that could be like a flash flood or a quick burn off. You think about shelving, it could be more trees, swamp, underground area, right? And that's more spaces to live for the animals. Pricing, hot or cold. Things move slower or faster in the heat and cold. And the reason I use that analogy is because I want to be the person giving a health assessment to your category.
Yeah.
But if I really want to know what's going on, then I have to go to the psychology side of it, and that's shopper insights. And shopper insights applied over the top can give me some whys. And shopper insights to me is sort of like the GPS in your car, or a larger weather system that comes over that environment. Like when COVID hit, when inflation hit, these things are larger patterns that came in over the top and have affected, and it gives us some color as to why those things are happening. And to me, people ask me what I do. I tell them I humanize data.
Yeah.
And humanizing data in my mind is understanding the post-mortem information and the healthiness of the category, and then bringing over the top of it all of the shopper insights and things that that help us give color and context as to what is actually happening. And those two things together, like with a human being, if you understand their biology and psychology, you kind of can figure out a lot of what's going on with somebody. It's the same with a category.
And that gets lost so often. So thank you. That's a beautiful analogy. Big lover of the environment and animals to begin with. So it resonates even more, which again, I have to ask, and you've done a really good job of this, but why do some stories fall completely flat while others completely engage?
It has everything to do with if we're addressing the needs and concerns of the retailer.
Yeah.
And I can tell you this, we had this insight before COVID. And we went to a workshop and said, boy, what do people do in their everyday life? And we kind of figured out that, well, we sell a lot of cleaning products. We have other products too, but the cleaning products is a big part of our business. And we realized every time someone makes a meal at home is usually the instigator of a lot of cleaning. You clean before, you clean after, you need our plastic wrap after, you need you create trash bags. So we realized that it's a food occasion that is often driving the demand on our non-foods products, right? So we started saying every food occasion is a cleaning and trash occasion, and we've expanded it to household essential occasions. Well, we kept saying that before COVID, and everyone's like, oh, that's really nice. That's really neat. What do we do with it, right? And so we would go off like we always do to FMI and different things with meetings with customers, and we tell them, half the people that walk in your store and grocery don't buy a cleaning product. They'll walk out your door without spending a thing. Aren't you worried about all these millions of dollars walking out the door? Aren't you worried about, you should care because we care, and by the way, every food occasion is a clean, and they're like, yeah. And they would just be like, the feedback we got was from one retailer at FMI, which was very transparent. He said, I don't care. He said, I'm a food retailer. I'm worried about losing my share of food. I need to sell more food.
Yeah.
And I'm never going to win that battle with these non-foods. And it really just, that strikes at the heart of a person in this business who calls on grocery. And I started to think, well, maybe it's because I'm approaching them with my perspective and our company's perspective rather than coming at them from their perspective. So we did a bunch of research and figured out how much other leakage is happening in food because we're creating a need and a trip to go somewhere else for the non-food stuff that's being created by having a food occasion, which is what the grocers want. So there's this self-propagating thing that happened. And I'll tell you, there's a couple memes I saw that are really powerful. One said, I went to Target to buy batteries, and that's all I bought. Said no one ever.
Correct.
There's another one that said, I went to Costco to buy paper towels, and $400 later, and they show a cart full of stuff. So what we were able to prove is we start thinking about it from the grocer standpoint. If they only care about food, let's show them how much food they're losing by creating extra trips to Costco, Walmart, all these other places, right?
Love that.
And we were able to show that they can get 4 times their share of wallet of food sales by eliminating just the cleaning trip leakage. So go focus on cleaning. And this is why you want to focus on cleaning, because it's going to save you from losing share of food to other venues, because you are creating demand on products that you're not servicing. And when you're not servicing those, you're creating the leakage opportunities and you're actually accelerating. That story has transformed our entire grocery approach and our strategy. And we now talk all the time to retailers about the food occasion. And you'll even see at retailers, you'll see things. We have food, we have Hidden Valley dressing, we have Kingsford charcoal, all these different products. You'll see we're here for the meal and the mess. You'll see these in their ads now because people say, yeah, you're right. Let's make sure we're selling these cleaning products because they're going to need them when they have the meal occasion. And it's really transformed how we work with our grocers, and it's really created an entirely new level of partnership.
One thought can shape an entire industry's future and focus and transform how we're speaking to our customers and how that resonates. That's beautifully done. I'm going to slightly switch gears. Dr. Glay, I want to hear a little bit more from your lens how we're using behavioral science to better understand people's emotional states, to develop that personalized communication strategy, right? Like how they resonate and how we get them to act. Talk to me about the approach and give me an example of how it's being done.
Yeah, I mean, I love Scott's approach of we're humanizing data, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's what behavioral science is all about is the quantitative and the qualitative aspect of it, which it's when a lot of people don't put a lot of emphasis on the qualitative aspect because it's really what the rich data comes from, right? That's when people feel, seen and understood. That's the emotional element of it on how they make decisions. So to draw from that, for us, the way we think about strategy is rooted in behavior science. Specifically, we look at two framework, optimal stimulations level, which really focus on, people frustrations level, right, in terms of where they are in their current state of life as far as products and services and how they feel about it. Are they happy? Are they dissatisfied? Do they feel frustrated? What are some of the constraints that prevents them from doing the things that they want to do? And how they're looking to solve that, right? We look at it through what we call their exploratory tendencies. And then that helps us understand at an intrinsic level, how do I speak to you, Amy Sirlin? Because this is your contextual intelligence, right? Where you are in this moment in time, right? How you're feeling, your openness to new ideas, where you're looking for those things. And I'm speaking to you, right, in a way that it resonates with you, that moves you across a continuum, right? And that's what OSF was. That's what we use. And then when you look at on the pharmaceutical side, we look at another framework there called necessity concern framework that really tap into belief system about prescription medication, right? If I feel like this is good for me, I am going to take it. But if I feel like the side effects and everything else, then the chances of, persistencies or adherence is less likely because I'm not going to do that. But how else can we understand that if we don't understand sort of their mindset, where they are? And then the next aspect of it is how do we communicate in such a way that they feel seen, they feel understood, that we're addressing their concerns. So that is just one example of how behavioral science, we use it within our strategic framework. Earlier, I talked about the consumer culture theory that talks about people seek meaning, right? Not transactional. And data is the empathy map. That's just the starting point, right? And the qualitative aspect of it is what really drives, the performance. Because believe it or not, a lot of it, we make decisions over emotions, how we feel about it. Do we feel good about it, right? It's not, oftentimes it's not rational decisions. How do we really feel good about it? So that is just some example of how we use behavioral science, and we infuse that into, our strategy. Because when you do that, it drives brand attachment, which is love, trust, and respect, which ultimately drive advocacy.
I can add one thing to that. I was just reading an article yesterday, and the article said we make more decisions emotionally more often than logical ones. I think people often act on emotion and use logic to rationalize their decisions, right? And emotion, like they had a quote from someone that said, emotion has nearly zero sway on my actions. I'm 74% logic, 25% instinct, and that 25% has very expensive taste. and that's funny, but it also highlights the blend factor that influence our decisions, right? Even though those who pride themselves on being logical are going to find emotion playing a major part in their decision making. So you're dead on. I love what you had to say.
Dr. Glay, give us an example where you've seen that happen in your career history.
In the context of, being data rich and insight more. That happened.
Turning data into a story that led to a slightly more meaningful business outcome.
Yeah, we do that day in, day out, right? Yep. So, the most recent example that I give you is around a campaign that we recently ran for Horizon Organics, right?
Sure.
So we know that Thanksgiving is an American tradition. Everyone is, it's get the family together. You're
love that time
in food and all of that. But this is a brand that's known for being sort of in a dairy space.
Yes.
Right. And, they wanted to have a conversation during the Thanksgiving holiday. And for us, instead of using, the typical data and insert the brand from a functional messaging standpoint to say, have a rising butter or whatever it may be as part of your spread, we asked a question, how much butter do you have in your spread? Right. And what happened is that a lot of people started sharing stories around, their grandma butter and everything else. And the rich story that were being shared really allow us to say, you know what, this is, now we're having that brand become, a participant in that conversation. And that data really led us to say, let's capitalize on that more. Are there other events to Scott's point, right? Earlier, like food events, for example, that we can then insert the brand into that from a conversation standpoint versus a functional messaging, right? Because functional messaging connects, but it doesn't connect as well when the brand is participating in that conversation. So that is one example where, where we use data to say, hey, this is an event that the brand wants to be part of, but how we approach it is a little different.
And that certainly changed the type of information that we received in from consumers, that emotional tie, that opportunity to take my grandmother grew up in the Depression. Butter was a delicacy. Butter was something that only really wealthy people could afford. And so that became a big deal growing up, and Thanksgiving's a perfect example.
And that message became personalized.
Yes.
It wasn't,
like that.
Horizon Organics being sort of like, hey, here is our butter that you can use, but it was more about that connection between their personal story and now the brand is participating in that conversation.
It's go time. All right, Scott, I'm going to start with you. Rapid fire, lightning round. If you could give one piece of advice to a data professional entering the field today, what would it be?
Be bold, ignore levels, and have an opinion.
I love that. How about you, Dr. Glay?
Data is just the start. There's always more context.
Okay, I like it. Let's stay with you, Alvin, if we can. Tell me about the role of AI in your current life versus 3 years from now. What's it look like?
I think productivity, sort of from an efficiency standpoint. Currently, AI helps alleviate a lot of the minutia and the manual work that I used to do. The example I give, when I did my doctoral studies, it took me 3 months to do my literature review, right? So that's going in every single research journal and looking at it. I use AI for that now to go and do the search, do the synthesis, and then, I can put my human hats on it and validate that. In the future, I have a bunch of agents doing stuff for me that, I want to get done. And I don't have to touch it.
I like that. How about for you, Scott?
I never used it until like a year ago or so when it started getting popular. And I've used it for a lot of imagery in my presentations. If I have this vision of how I want to tell a story and convey an emotion, I've used it for that. And I've also used it to say, I'm thinking through the process and I was thinking, why don't grocers display non-foods? I'll ask Chat GTP, I'll just drop it in there and it gives me 9 reasons. And I've thought of 7 of them, but it kind of fills out a little more of a full thought process and gives me more things to think about. Oh, I didn't think about this angle. Maybe I need to go down this path a little bit.
Yeah, I found the same. It bridges the gap. 70 to 80% of what it's already telling you, but it just helps you to reframe the story slightly different in your brain. Guys, that brings us to the end of today's episode of the Edge Lab. Thank you very much, Scott and Dr. Alvin Glay, for sharing your experiences and that stark reminder that in a world that's overflowing with data, empathy is what turns those insights into impact. I really appreciate the opportunity to bridge the gap with storytelling, smart insights, and turning those analytics into human behaviors that show us what powerful storytelling can actually do. So if today's conversation resonated with all of you, as I know that it has, be sure that you subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and be sure to connect with us on LinkedIn for more insights and behind the scenes content. And if your brand's looking to turn data into strategy, insights, or action, here at Response Media, we would love to help. We partner with brands to help unlock growth across the spectrum, giving you smarter data, more meaningful connections, and performance-driven media. So reach out. We're here to help collaborate and partner moving forward. And we're going to be back soon with more stories and frontline information of data-led innovation. So until then, I'm Amy Sirlin, and thank you for joining us on the #1 podcast today, Edge Labs. Have a great day and a great week ahead, everyone. Thanks.
Thanks. See you.
Thank you.
Bye.
This was The Edge Lab. Thanks for tuning in. Subscribe and stay with us as we keep pushing the boundaries of marketing innovation. Until next time.